Hi, welcome back to my channel. Colleen C. to Serendipity. I'm Colleen. Welcome into my new viewers and welcome back to my Serendipity subbies. Today is February 7th, 2023, and I would like to bring you this day in history. On February 7th, 1964, Pan Am Yankee Clipper Flight 101 from London's Heathrow lands at New York's Kennedy Airport and Beatlemania arrives. It was the first visit to the United States by the Beatles, a British rock and roll quartet that had just scored its first #1 U.S. hit 6 days with I Wanna Hold Your Hand. At Kennedy, the Fab Four, dressed in mod suits and sporting their trademark pudding bowl haircuts, were greeted by 3,000 screaming fans who caused a near riot when the boys stepped off their plane and onto American soil. 2 days later, Paul McCartney, age 21, Ringo Starr, 23, John Lennon, 23, and George Harrison, 20, made their first appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show, a popular television variety show. Although it was difficult to hear the performance over the screams of the teenage girls in the studio audience, an estimated 73 million U.S. television viewers, or about 40% of the U.S. population, tuned in to watch. Sullivan immediately booked the Beatles for 2 more appearances that month. The group made their first public concert appearance in the U.S. on February 11th at the Coliseum in Washington, D.C., and 20,000 fans attended. The next day, they gave 2 back-to-back performances at New York's Carnegie Hall, and the police were forced to close off the streets around the vulnerable music hall because of fan hysteria. On February 22nd, the Beatles returned to England. The Beatles' first American tour left a major imprint on the nation's culture memory. An American youth poised to break away from the culturally rigid landscape of the 1950s. The Beatles, with their exuberant music and good-natured rebellion, were the perfect catalyst for the shift. Their singles and albums sold millions of records, and at one point in April 1964, all 5 best-selling U.S. singles were Beatles songs. By the time the Beatles' first featured film, A Hard Day's Night, was released in August, Beatlemania was epidemic the world over. Later that month, the 4 boys from Liverpool returned to the U.S. for their second tour and played 2 sold-out arenas across the country. Later, the Beatles gave up touring to concentrate on their innovative studio recordings, such as the 1967's Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, a psychedelic concept album that is regarded as a masterpiece of popular music. The Beatles' music remained relevant to youth throughout the great culture shift of the 1960s, and critics of all ages acknowledged the songwriting genius of Lennon and McCartney team. In 1970, the Beatles disbanded, leaving a legacy of 18 albums and 30 top 10 U.S. singles. During the next decade, all 4 Beatles pursued solo careers with varying success. Lennon, the most outspoken and controversial Beatle, was shot to death by a deranged fan outside his New York apartment building in 1980. McCartney was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II in 1997 for his contribution to British culture. In November 2001, George Harrison succumbed to cancer, and Ringo Starr was knighted himself for service in music in 2018. Now I'd like to read you a little bit more about when Beatlemania swept the USA. the United States. Excuse me. In late 1963, the Beatles guitarist John Lennon and George Harrison, bassist Paul McCartney, and drummer Ringo Starr were already a household name in the United Kingdom and much of Europe. More than 15 million viewers had tuned in to their performance on Val Parnell's Sunday night at London Palladium, and the band was regularly playing sold-out shows to their legions of swooning teenage fans. But while they had staked their claim on top of the single charts in England, the Beatles still struggled for recognition across the pond. Their first U.S. single, that jaunted Please Please Me, and the catchy From Me to You had flopped, and Capitol Records, an American arm of their label EMI, appeared uninterested in promoting a foreign band. The lads from Liverpool would finally catch a break in October 1963 while passing through London's Heathrow Airport. American television host Ed Sullivan noticed hundreds of exciting teenagers waiting to see the Beatles return from a tour of Sweden. Sullivan had never heard of the shaggy-haired quartet, but after learning about their fantastical following, he felt they had the potential to be as big as Elvis Presley. A few weeks later, Sullivan booked the group to appear on his popular television program. Armed to a gig on the Ed Sullivan Show, the Beatles finally gained traction in the United States. Capitol Records agreed to back their upcoming record, and CBS News anchor Walter Cronkite reported on Beatlemania phenomenon in England. In early December, a 15-year-old Maryland girl named Marsha Albert saw the group on the news and wrote her local radio station asking, "Why can't we have music like that here in America?" When a DJ tracked down a copy of their still unreleased single, "I Wanna Hold Your Hand," the song became a massive hit. Capitol Records had to scramble to get the single onto record store shelves, and it went on to sell 1 million copies in a matter of 6 days. By all accounts, the Beatles still had no idea what was in store for them on February 7, 1964. When they took off from London bound for American shores, Lennon remembered thinking, "Oh, we won't make it," while Starr recalled feeling a bit sick with anticipation. But when they touched down in New York, the group found themselves greeted by a flock of 3,000 ecstatic, screaming fans, many of them teens playing hooky from school. The band was stunned. See thousands of kids there to meet us made us realize just how popular we are there. Harrison said later in their first press conference, the Beatles appeared relaxed and upbeat. Clad in matching suits, the band fired back at the sea of reporters with cheeky quirks that the New York Times later called the Beatles' wit. We have a message, McCartney declared in between questions about the band's name and their mop-top haircuts. Buy more Beatle records. From the airport, the Beatles were each tucked into their own limousine and whisked away to the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. Safe from the rabid fans camped out on the streets below, they spent the evening chatting on air with local DJ Murray the K, while the brothers Albert and Dave Maysles, the same filmmakers who later chronicled the Rolling Stones in the 1970 film Give Me Shelter, rolled cameras for a documentary. The next day bought another round of interviews and photo sessions, but the band also squeezed in a sightseeing tour of New York. Ever the music a fictional dudes. The Beatles insisted on passing through Harlem to catch a glimpse of the famed Apollo Theater. The band arrived at CBS TV Studios 50 on Sunday, February 9th, and prepped for their Ed Sullivan Show appearance with a filmed sound check. Shortly after 8 p.m., Sullivan would finally introduce John, Paul, George, and Ringo to America with now famous words, "Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles," as a packed rendition of All My Love and Till There Was You, before driving the crowd into a frenzy with the catchy She Loves You. And the Beatles returned later that evening for a second set featuring energetic version of I Saw Her Standing There and their number one hit, I Wanna Hold Your Hand, both nearly drowned out by screams of joy from female audience members. Television ratings for the appearance proved astronomical. According to the Nielsen Company, a record-breaking 73 million viewers tuned in to watch the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, nearly 40% of the U.S. population at the time. Some newspapers still tried to dismiss the British hit makers as a passing fad, but the numbers didn't lie. Beatlemania had taken the U.S. by storm. Riding the wave, their star-making turn on Ed Sullivan, the Beatles left New York on February 11th for Washington, D.C., where they played their first ever American stage show at the Washington Coliseum. By now, their popularity had reached dizzying heights. Businesses were selling novelty Beatle wigs and clothing, and the band couldn't travel without being mobbed by hordes of breathless music lovers. In Washington, their management team had to distract fans with decoy Beatles wearing wigs just to allow the group to reach the stage. When they later took a train back to New York, their rail car had to be switched to a separate platform to bypass swarms of waiting kids. Some fans came to blows jockeying for a better position in the crowds, and police were forced to contend with teens rushing their barricades just to get a chance to touch their heroes. During the gatherings in Washington, an overzealous teenage girl, snuck up behind Starr and cut off a lock of his hair as a souvenir. He later remarked that all the attention made him feel like something in a zoo. Following a pair of shows at New York's prestigious Carnegie Hall, the Beatles headed south to appear on another episode of the Ed Sullivan Show. Being filmed in Miami on February 16th, they took the stage for their second live television appearance, playing 6 songs before a ravenous crowd of 2,600. All told, an estimated 7 million people also gathered around the television sets to watch at home. The band spent the next few days taking in the sands and surf around Miami with a small army of photographers and newsmen in tow. They also posed for now famous photo op with the boxer Cassius Clay, later Muhammad Ali, who was in town for a championship bout with Sonny Liston. The Beatles would finally leave America a few days later, arriving back in London to a crowd of some 10,000 fans who greeted them like they were generals back from a campaign. The British invasion of America, as Walter Cronkite had called it, had ended in conquest. 5 Beatles songs were entrenched in the Billboard's Hot 100, including the top 2 slots, and their television performance had broken rating records. In only 2 weeks, the band had made an indelible mark on American pop culture. Their shaggy hair, witty interviews, and loose, exuberant sound had proven irresistible, and the wave of British bands would soon follow in their footsteps. The Beatles had stepped into the dramatic had stepped onto the tarmac at JFK International Airport on February 7th as an overseas oddity, but left on February 22nd as genuine superstars. I want to thank you for watching this day in history, but I want you to stay safe and stay blessed, and remember to smile, because I love you, but more importantly, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ loves you the most. And I'll see you in my next video, everybody. And don't forget, I go live every Saturday at 5 p.m. Central and at 6 p.m. Eastern. All right, everybody, have a blessed day, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.